Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today for our Monday Healing Step session here in the Bridge to Healing community. Now, if you're here or watching for the first time, I'm Janine Naus, your grief and trauma relief specialist, and I combine my personal experience and professional training to support you in navigating trauma, loss, and emotional pain with compassion, clarity, and care. So if you're watching the replay, go ahead and type pound replay in the comments. And if you're here with me live, say hello and type pound live. And I'd love to know where you're joining me from. So today we're exploring something very personal and very common for survivors of trauma. And that is the way trauma twists your inner voice. Not the voice you use to speak to others, but the one that speaks to you. Now, the voice that whispers when you make a mistake, when you try something new, or when you're just trying to rest. Now, for many trauma survivors, this voice isn't, this voice doesn't sound loving or kind. It sounds critical, harsh, and it can be even cruel. And it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because the wounds of trauma often get internalized, and the messages you heard or felt during painful moments can start echoing inside your mind. So today we're going to gently unpack why that happens and what it looks like, and most importantly, how to begin reclaiming your inner voice with love and also power. So let's begin together by exploring the first teaching point. So, one of the most painful impacts of trauma is that it disconnects us from our own inner knowing, especially if your trauma involved emotional manipulation, gaslighting, or prolonged abuse. And it's likely you were trained over time to doubt yourself. So, you may have been told things like, that never happened. You're too sensitive. You're just making things up. Or maybe, or maybe you weren't told anything at all, but your reality was repeatedly denied, minimized, or ignored. And then over time, these experiences create a split inside. You stop trusting what you feel, you question your instincts, and you start relying on external cues like other people's approvals, their moods, or responses to decide what's true for you. And that's not weakness, that's survival. Because when you grow up or live in an environment where your truth is unsafe, your nervous system learns to adapt. And you might find yourself now second guessing everything, replaying conversations, even over apologizing, or perhaps shrinking in moments where you want to speak up. So many survivors say things like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I feel like I can't trust myself. I always assume I'm the one in the wrong. That's not your fault. That's what happens when your inner voice was shaped in the presence of pain. So let's take a breath together here. Wonderful. So, have you ever caught yourself thinking something cruel about yourself and realized it didn't even sound like you? Yeah. Maybe it sounded like a parent, a past partner, or someone who hurt you. If so, drop a yes in the comments or just gently acknowledge that to yourself. That's the beginning of awareness, and awareness is the first doorway to healing. So let's move into our second teaching point and talk about what it takes to begin changing that inner voice. See, once we realize our inner voice has been shaped by trauma, it can feel overwhelming. And you might think, where do I even begin to change it? But here's the beautiful truth. Just as that voice was conditioned by past pain, it can also be reshaped by present love. See, healing is not about silencing every negative thought. It's about creating a new path, those new pathways where your inner dialogue becomes a source of truth, compassion, and clarity. And that doesn't mean toxic positivity. It means offering yourself the same tone you'd use with a dear friend. It means interrupting the inner critic with a wiser, softer truth. It means remembering you are no longer living in the trauma, but your body and inner voice might not know that yet. So, what is one thing you wish someone had said to you in a moment of pain, but they didn't? Can you speak that to yourself today? Now, feel free to share it in the comments or just place your hand on your heart and say it quietly inside. Now, this is how we begin to shift the narrative, not all at once, not perfectly, but moment by moment, breath by breath, with intention. Now, I'd love to share a personal story with you because this isn't just theory, it's something I've lived. Now, there was a time in my life when my inner voice wasn't mine at all. It echoed the voices of people who had harmed me, telling me I was too much, not enough, always at fault. Even after I started therapy and healing work, I noticed that voice would still show up, especially in moments of uncertainty or conflict. And it sounded like, "You're being dramatic. You should just be grateful. You're the problem." And then one day, after a painful interaction that left me spiraling, I paused. I sat quietly, hand on my heart, and I asked myself, whose voice is this? And in that stillness, I realized it wasn't mine. It was a voice I had inherited from pain. And I made a decision right then. If I had internalized that voice through repetition, I could begin to rewire it through love. And that didn't mean pretending I was okay all the time. It meant telling myself the truth gently. It meant practicing saying, "You're safe now. You're allowed to rest. You don't have to prove your worth." And slowly that voice began to shift. That same shift is possible for you. So let me offer you a simple practice that's helped me and many of my clients begin that change. Here's a grounding practice you can try today. So you want to place one hand on your heart and then one on your belly. The next step is close your eyes and soften your gaze. Then the next step is take a deep breath in through your nose and slowly out through your mouth. And then the next step is gently say to yourself, "I am safe in this moment. I deserve kindness for myself. I'm learning how to trust my own voice again." Repeat those phrases, or you can create your own. And that speaks to the part of you that still feels afraid or unseen. And it may feel awkward at first. That's okay. Think of it like tending a garden. Each word is a seed, and with time, consistency, and love, your inner voice will grow into something nurturing, something that honors the truth of who you are. So set aside a quiet moment later today to journal on this question. What does my inner voice sound like today? And what would I like it to sound like in a year? I'm going to go ahead and repeat that for you. What does my inner voice sound like today? And what would I like it to sound like in a year? Then let your pen move freely. Don't judge what comes up. Just notice with care. Now, if today's session spoke to you, spoke to something in your heart, and you'd like support around healing your inner voice or untangling the lingering impacts of trauma, I'd love to invite you to a free 30-minute healing session with me. Now, this is a gentle, no pressure space where we can explore what's showing up for you and what healing might look like. And we can do this together. So you don't have to walk this alone. And you can book a session at the link in the comments. And I want to thank you so much for being here today and for honoring your healing, for showing up for your inner voice, I'll see you next Monday for our next healing step session. Until then, speak to yourself like someone worth loving, because you are. Thank you for joining me here today. Goodbye.